Sometimes the most unexpected answers come from the most unexpected places. When a successful businessman's world crumbles in a single night, leaving him alone with a crying baby and no idea how to care for her, he discovers that desperation can lead to the most beautiful transformations. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a man who thought he had everything figured out, until life taught him that true strength sometimes comes wrapped in the most humble packages. What happens when a Wall Street executive meets an Apache grandmother who sees through his polished exterior to the broken man beneath? What occurs when two worlds, one of corporate boardrooms and another of ancient wisdom, collide over the simple need to care for an innocent child? This is not just a story about finding help. This is a story about finding home, family, and discovering that sometimes the person you think you're saving is actually the one saving you. Marcus Chun had always believed that money could solve any problem. At 34, he had built a financial empire that most people could only dream of. His penthouse apartment in Manhattan overlooked Central Park, his garage housed 3 luxury cars, and his bank account had more zeros than he could spend in a lifetime. But on that cold February morning, as he sat in his sterile living room holding his 3-month-old daughter Emma, he realized that all his wealth meant nothing. The baby had been crying for 2 hours straight. Her tiny face was red and scrunched up, tears streaming down her cheeks as she wailed with the intensity that only newborns could muster. Marcus bounced her gently, tried feeding her again, changed her diaper for the 4th time, but nothing worked. The formula he had hastily prepared sat cooling on the marble coffee table, untouched and mocking him with its simplicity. "Come on, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice cracking with exhaustion and desperation. "Please, just tell me what you need." But Emma couldn't tell him anything. She was just a baby who had lost her mother 3 months ago during childbirth, and now had only him, a man who had spent more time in boardrooms and nurseries, who knew how to negotiate million-dollar deals but had no idea how to comfort a crying infant. The apartment felt enormous and empty around them. Sarah's presence had filled these rooms with warmth and laughter, but now they felt like a museum of their former life together. Her coffee cup still sat on the kitchen counter, exactly where she had left it that morning when they rushed to the hospital, thinking they would return home as a family of 3. Instead, Marcus had come back alone with Emma, his world shattered beyond recognition. The first nanny had quit after 2 weeks. Mrs. Henderson had been a stern woman in her 60s with impressive credentials and a no-nonsense attitude. She had managed to keep Emma fed and changed, but Marcus could see the disapproval in her eyes every time he came home late from work, every time he fumbled with a diaper, every time he reached for Emma with hands that still trembled with uncertainty. "Mr. Chun," she had said on her last day, standing in the foyer with her bags packed, "this child needs more than just care. She needs love, attention, and consistency. You're trying to run a household like a business, and it doesn't work that way." Marcus had offered her more money, doubled her salary, promised flexible hours, but she had shaken her head sadly and walked away. That was the beginning of a 6-month journey through a revolving door of caregivers. The second nanny, Maria, had been younger and more energetic. She had connected with Emma beautifully, singing Spanish lullabies that made the baby smile for the first time since Sarah's death. But Maria had her own family to care for, and when her own grandmother fell ill, she had to return to Puerto Rico. Marcus had understood, had even continued paying her salary for 3 months to help with medical bills, but understanding didn't fill the void she left behind. Then came Jennifer, a recent college graduate with a degree in early childhood education, and enthusiasm that reminded Marcus painfully of Sarah. She had lasted 3 months before accepting a position with a family in California who could offer her the stability and normal life she craved. After Jennifer came Patricia, who quit after Emma got sick, and Marcus panicked, insisting on taking her to the emergency room for what turned out to be a common cold. Patricia had looked at him with pity and told him he needed to learn to trust his instincts as a father before he could expect anyone else to help him. Each departure felt like another loss, another confirmation that he was failing Emma in every possible way. The baby had grown more difficult with each change, sensing the instability and responding with longer crying spells, disrupted sleep, and a general fussiness that broke Marcus's heart. He could see that she was beginning to withdraw, becoming less responsive, less trusting. The pediatrician had gently suggested that Emma needed consistency, a primary caregiver who would stay, someone who could provide the emotional security that multiple caregivers couldn't offer. By the time summer arrived, Marcus had been through 8 nannies. His colleagues at the investment firm had begun to notice his distraction, his frequent absences, the way his hands shook during important meetings. His assistant, Mrs. Rodriguez, had started fielding calls from angry clients who couldn't understand why one of the city's most reliable financial advisors had suddenly become unreachable. "Sir," she had said one afternoon, knocking softly on his office door, "the Thompson account is threatening to pull their investment if you don't return their calls by Friday." Marcus had looked up from the spreadsheet he had been staring at without seeing for the past hour. The numbers blurred together like alphabet soup, meaningless and overwhelming. "How much is the Thompson account worth?" "12 million, sir." He had laughed then, a hollow sound that made Mrs. Rodriguez step back in concern. $12 million, and I can't find one person to help me take care of my daughter. That evening, Marcus sat in Emma's nursery as she finally slept peacefully in her crib. The room was perfect. Sarah had spent months planning every detail. The walls were painted a soft lavender with delicate butterflies hand-stenciled along the border. A rocking chair sat in the corner where Sarah had planned to nurse and sing lullabies. Mobile of dancing animals hung over the crib, though Emma rarely seemed interested in their colorful movements. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling through the contact list of nanny agencies he had memorized by heart. Elite Childcare Services, Sunshine Nannies, Metropolitan Domestic Staff. He had tried them all, some multiple times. The agencies had begun to recognize his name, and he could hear the hesitation in their voices when he called. Word had spread in the small world of professional childcare that Marcus Chun was difficult to work for, that his household was unstable, that nannies didn't last long in his employment. But it wasn't that he was difficult, he told himself as he watched Emma's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. It was that he was desperate to find someone who would love Emma the way Sarah would have. Desperate to find someone who wouldn't leave when things got challenging. Desperate to find someone who could fill the maternal void that Sarah's death had created. He thought about his own childhood, raised by a series of au pairs while his parents traveled for their diplomatic careers. He remembered the loneliness, the constant adjustment to new faces and new rules, the way he had learned early not to get too attached because people always left eventually. He had sworn he would never put his own child through that. Yet here he was, repeating the same cycle. The baby monitor crackled softly, and Marcus could hear Emma stirring. She would be awake soon, hungry and needy, and he would fumble through another feeding, another diaper change, another attempt at comfort that felt clumsy and inadequate. He was a successful businessman who could predict market trends and manage complex portfolios, but He couldn't figure out why his daughter cried or what would make her smile. The doorbell rang, startling him from his thoughts. Marcus glanced at the clock. It was nearly 10 at night. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his doorman usually called before allowing visitors up. He made his way to the front door, checking the security monitor to see an elderly woman standing in the hallway. She was short and stocky, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, and wearing a simple brown dress that looked handmade. Her face was weathered but kind, with deep lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter and wisdom. Marcus hesitated before opening the door. "Can I help you?" The woman looked up at him with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through his expensive suit and polished exterior. "You are the man with the crying baby," she said simply. It wasn't a question. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong apartment," Marcus replied, though something in her calm demeanor made him pause. "I don't think so," she said gently. "I'm Rosa Whitos. I've come about the job." Marcus frowned. He hadn't contacted any new agencies in the past week, too discouraged and exhausted to face another round of interviews and inevitable disappointments. "What job?" "I haven't advertised for anything recently." Rosa smiled, and her entire face transformed, becoming warm and maternal in a way that made Marcus's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Sometimes the job finds you," she said. "Sometimes the person who needs help and the person who can help are brought together in ways that don't make sense to the mind, but make perfect sense to the heart." Before Marcus could respond, Emma's cry echoed through the apartment, that familiar wail that had become the soundtrack to his life. Rosa's head tilted slightly, listening with the attention of someone who understood the language of infant distress. "She's hungry," Rosa said matter-of-factly, "but she's also scared. Babies know when the people caring for them are afraid, and fear makes them afraid too." Marcus stared at this strange woman who had appeared at his door like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known how to pray. "Who are you? How did you know to come here?" Rosa stepped past him into the apartment, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "I'm Apache," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "My people understand that children are sacred, that they choose their families before they're born. Your daughter chose you, but she's waiting for you to choose yourself as her father." She walked toward the sound of Emma's crying without invitation, and Marcus found himself following, mesmerized by her calm certainty. In the nursery, Rosa approached the crib with reverence, her weathered hands gentle as she lifted Emma into her arms. The crying stopped immediately, as if a switch had been flipped. "Hello, little star," Rosa murmured, cradling Emma against her shoulder. "I've been waiting to meet you." Marcus watched in amazement as Emma settled into Rosa's arms, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire short life. The baby's tiny hand grasped Rosa's finger, and for the first time in months, Marcus heard something he had almost forgotten existed: silence. Not the tense quiet of a sleeping baby who might wake at any moment, but the peaceful silence of a content child. "How did you do that?" he whispered. Rosa looked at him with those knowing eyes. "She doesn't need someone who knows everything about babies," she said. "She needs someone who understands that love is the first language, and everything else can be learned." As Marcus stood in the doorway of his daughter's nursery, watching this Apache woman hold his child with the expertise of someone who had raised generations, he felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt hope. Not the desperate hope of a man grasping at straws, but the solid hope of someone who has found exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. Rosa began to hum a low, melodic sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient. Emma's eyes grew heavy, Her breathing deepened, and Marcus realized he was witnessing something he had thought might be impossible, his daughter being truly comforted. "I don't understand how you found us," he said quietly, afraid to break the spell that seemed to have settled over the room. "Understanding isn't always necessary," Rosa replied, still humming softly. "Sometimes accepting is enough." Outside, the city continued its restless movement, but inside the nursery, time seemed suspended. Marcus watched his daughter sleep peacefully in the arms of a stranger who felt like family, and for the first time in 6 months, he allowed himself to believe that everything might actually be okay. The morning after Rosa Whitehorse's mysterious arrival, Marcus woke to something he hadn't experienced in months: silence. Not the anxious quiet of a temporarily sleeping baby, but genuine peace. He lay in bed for a moment, listening, before the realization hit him that he had slept through the entire night without interruption. Emma hadn't cried once. He found Rosa in the kitchen, moving with quiet efficiency as she prepared what smelled like the most delicious breakfast he had encountered in years. She wore the same simple brown dress from the night before, but somehow she looked completely at home in his modern kitchen, as if she had been cooking there for decades. "Where's Emma?" Marcus asked, suddenly, panicked that he couldn't hear or see his daughter. "She's in her room, awake and content," Rosa replied without turning from the stove. "She's been up for an hour, just looking around and discovering her world. Babies don't always need to cry to communicate." Marcus hurried to the nursery to find Emma exactly as Rosa had described, lying peacefully in her crib, making soft cooing sounds as she watched the morning light filter through the curtains. When she saw him, she didn't cry or fuss. Instead, she gave him something he had only seen once before, on the day she was born: a genuine smile. "She smiled at me," he called out to Rosa, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course she did," came Rosa's reply from the kitchen. "You're her father." When Marcus returned to the kitchen, carrying Emma, he found Rosa had prepared a feast. Fresh bread that smelled like it had come from a bakery, eggs prepared in a way he had never seen before with herbs he couldn't identify, and something that looked like traditional porridge, but tasted infinitely better than anything he had ever eaten. "How did you make all this?" "I barely have any groceries in the house," he said, settling Emma into her high chair. Rosa smiled mysteriously. "I brought what I needed." Apache women always come prepared to nourish the people they care for. As Marcus ate, he studied Rosa more carefully in the daylight. She appeared to be in her 60s, though her exact age was difficult to determine. Her face was lined, but not aged, weathered by sun and experience rather than time. Her hands were strong and sure, moving with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime caring for others. There was something timeless about her, as if she could have stepped out of any decade from the past century and fit perfectly. "I need to ask you some questions," Marcus said carefully, not wanting to offend this woman who had already worked miracles with Emma. "I need to know about your background, your experience, your references. I'm sure you understand that I have to be careful when it comes to my daughter's safety." Rosa nodded approvingly. "A father who doesn't ask questions is not a father worth having." "Yes, ask me anything you need to know." Marcus pulled out a notebook where he had written down the standard questions he asked all potential caregivers. "How long have you been working with children?" 52 years, Rosa replied. "I started when my younger siblings were born, helped raise my nephews and nieces, then my grandchildren. I've been a grandmother to my own family and to many others who needed one." "Do you have formal training in childcare?" Rosa's eyes twinkled with amusement. "I have a doctorate in life experience and a master's degree in love." "Will that be sufficient?" Marcus found himself smiling despite his determination to be thorough and professional. What about references? I can give you names of families I've helped, though some of the children I raised are now grandparents themselves. But perhaps a better reference would be your daughter. Ask her if she feels safe with me. They both looked at Emma, who was contentedly chewing on a piece of the soft bread Rosa had given her. The baby caught their attention and laughed, a sound so joyful and pure that Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. She hasn't laughed like that since. Marcus trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Since her mother died, Rosa completed gently. Children grieve too, even babies. They feel the sadness of the people around them, and they carry it in their tiny hearts until someone helps them remember how to be happy. Marcus put down his notebook. How did you know about Sarah? The same way I knew you needed help. The same way I knew that your daughter was waiting for someone to show her that the world could be safe and joyful again. Rosa reached across the table and placed her weathered hand over his. My people believe that we are all connected, that the pain of one becomes the responsibility of all. When someone is hurting, the universe conspires to bring healing. But how did you physically find me? How did you know where I lived? Rosa was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying his face. My grandson works as a security guard in this building. Night shift. He's been listening to the baby cry for months, hearing your footsteps pacing the floors above his station. Last week, he came to me and said, "Grandmother, there's a man upstairs who sounds like his heart is breaking every night. Can you help him?" The simplicity of the explanation somehow made it even more miraculous to Marcus. Your grandson, what's his name? Tommy. Thomas Whitehorse. He's 24, studying to be a social worker during the day. He believes, like I do, that people are meant to help each other. Marcus realized he had never paid attention to the night security staff, barely acknowledging their presence as he rushed in and out of the building with Emma. The idea that someone had been listening to their struggles, caring enough to reach out for help, humbled him in a way that his corporate success never had. What would you need from me if you took this position? He asked. Trust, Rosa said immediately. Trust that I know what's best for Emma when you're not here. Trust that my ways might be different from what you're used to, but they work. Trust that I won't leave when things get difficult. And what do you need practically? Salary, benefits, schedule. Rosa waved her hand dismissively. Money is necessary, but it's not why I'm here. Pay me what you paid the others. As for schedule, babies don't work on schedules, so I don't either. I'll be here when you need me, and I'll rest when Emma rests. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. You're saying you want to live here? If that's acceptable. I have a small apartment, but Emma needs consistency. She needs to know that when she wakes up frightened in the night, the same person will always be there to comfort her. That afternoon, Marcus called his office to tell them he would be working from home for the rest of the week. Mrs. Rodriguez sounded shocked. In 10 years of working for him, he had never taken time off for anything except mandatory business travel. Is everything all right, sir? She asked. Everything is perfect, Marcus replied, and for the first time in months, he meant it. He spent the day observing Rosa with Emma, amazed by the transformation in both the apartment and his daughter. Rosa moved through the space as if she belonged there, but she also transformed it in subtle ways. The harsh overhead lights were replaced with softer lamps. The pristine surfaces where Sarah's memory lived untouched were gently incorporated into the daily life of caring for Emma. She's not trying to replace your wife, Rosa said quietly when she noticed him watching her dust Sarah's picture on the mantel. She's helping your daughter understand that love doesn't end when someone dies. It grows and includes more people. Rosa had a way of talking to Emma that was completely different from the professional caregivers who had come before. She didn't speak in the high-pitched baby talk that Marcus had grown to hate, nor did she treat Emma like a fragile object that might break. Instead, she spoke to the baby as if she were a person worthy of respect and genuine conversation. "Now, little star," Rosa would say as she changed Emma's diaper, "we're going to get you clean and comfortable, and then we're going to practice sitting up. Your daddy needs to see how strong and capable you are." She sang to Emma constantly, but not traditional lullabies. Instead, she sang what she called Apache learning songs, melodies that told stories about animals and seasons and the connections between all living things. Emma listened with rapt attention, her eyes following Rosa's mouth as if she was trying to understand every word. "Music is the first language," Rosa explained to Marcus. "Before babies can speak, they understand rhythm and melody. These songs teach her about her place in the world, about the fact that she belongs to something bigger than just this apartment." By evening, Marcus realized he hadn't heard Emma cry once since Rosa's arrival. Not from hunger, not from discomfort, not from the mysterious distress that had characterized her first months of life. It wasn't that Rosa prevented Emma from experiencing any negative emotions. The baby still got tired and fussy. But Rosa seemed to understand Emma's needs before they became urgent, responding to subtle cues that Marcus was only beginning to notice. "How do you know what she needs before she cries?" he asked as Rosa prepared Emma's evening meal. "I listen with more than my ears," Rosa replied. "Babies speak with their whole bodies. The way she moves her hands, the way her breathing changes, the way she looks around the room, it all tells me what she's feeling." That night, as Rosa settled Emma for bed, Marcus found himself drawn to the nursery doorway again. But this time, instead of anxiety and dread, he felt peace. Rosa was telling Emma a story in what Marcus assumed was Apache, her voice low and rhythmic. Emma's eyes grew heavy as she listened, her tiny hand curled around Rosa's finger. "What are you telling her?" Marcus whispered. "I'm telling her about her mother," Rosa replied softly. "I'm telling her that love is stronger than death, that her mother is always with her, and that she has two families now, the one she was born to and the one that chose her." As Rosa gently placed Emma in her crib, the baby didn't fuss or resist. She simply curled up with her blanket and closed her eyes, secure in the knowledge that she was safe and loved. "She's going to sleep through the night again, isn't she?" Marcus said, hardly daring to believe it. "She's going to sleep like a child who knows she's protected," Rosa confirmed. "And so are you." That night, Marcus did sleep deeply, but not just because Emma was quiet. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of parenthood entirely alone. There was someone in his home who understood children, who loved Emma not because she was paid to, but because that's what she did, loved children who needed love. But more than that, Marcus sensed that Rosa was healing something in him too, though he couldn't yet understand what that might be. All he knew was that for the first time in months, his home felt like a place where a family lived, rather than a museum where a broken man tried desperately to care for a child he didn't know how to reach. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus could hear Rosa humming softly in the room next to Emma's, an old Apache lullaby that seemed to bless the entire apartment with peace. 2 weeks into Rosa's residency, Marcus discovered that having the right person care for Emma was both a blessing and a challenge. The blessing was obvious. Emma was thriving in ways he had never imagined possible. She was more alert, more responsive, and developing at a pace that amazed her pediatrician. The challenge was that Rosa's methods were unlike anything Marcus had experienced with previous caregivers, and learning to trust her unconventional approach required him to let go of control in ways that terrified him. The first real test came on a Tuesday morning when Marcus prepared to leave for his first in-person client meeting in months. The Yamamoto account was worth $15 million, and Mr. Yamamoto had specifically requested a face-to-face consultation after months of Marcus's distracted phone calls and delayed responses. "I should be back by 3, Marcus told Rosa as he adjusted his tie for the third time, anxiety making his hands unsteady. "Emma usually naps at 1, but if she seems tired earlier, don't wait. Her formula is measured out in the refrigerator, and I've written down the schedule for meals and activities." Rosa looked up from where she sat on the living room floor with Emma, who was contentedly playing with a set of wooden blocks that Rosa had somehow produced from her seemingly endless supply of mysterious items. "Marcus," Rosa said gently, "Emma and I will be fine. We don't need a schedule to tell us when to eat or sleep or play. We'll listen to each other and respond to what feels right." Marcus felt his chest tighten with familiar panic. But the other nannies always followed the schedule. The pediatrician said consistency was important for her development. Consistency in love and attention, yes. Consistency in rigid timing, no. Rosa stood and placed her hand on his arm. "Your daughter is not a machine that needs to be programmed. She's a human being with her own rhythms and needs. What if something goes wrong? What if she gets sick or hurt? Then I will handle it the same way mothers have handled such things for thousands of years. With wisdom, love, and good judgment." Marcus looked at Emma, who was now trying to stack the wooden blocks with intense concentration, occasionally babbling to herself in a language only babies understood. She looked so content, so secure in Rosa's presence, that his logical mind told him everything would be fine. But the part of him that had been terrified of making a mistake since Sarah's death couldn't let go. "Maybe I should cancel the meeting," he said. "The Yamamoto account isn't that important." Rosa's expression became stern for the first time since Marcus had known her. "Marcus-chun, you are going to that meeting. You're going to do your job well, because that's who you are. And you're going to trust that I can care for your daughter because that's who I am." Something in her tone reminded Marcus of his own grandmother, the one person in his childhood who had never accepted his excuses or fears. He found himself nodding despite his anxiety. "Good," Rosa said, her expression softening again. "Now go make money so you can provide for this beautiful child. We'll be here when you return, and we'll have stories to tell you." The meeting with Mr. Yamamoto went better than Marcus had dared hope. For the first time in months, he was able to focus completely on his client's needs, presenting investment strategies with the confidence and expertise that had built his reputation. Without the constant underlying worry about Emma's well-being, his mind was sharp and creative again. "Chun-sen," Mr. Yamamoto said as they concluded their discussion, "you seem different today. More centered, more present." "I am," Marcus replied, surprised by the truth of the statement. "I have good help at home now." When he returned to his apartment at 2:30, Marcus found it transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The formal living room, which had always felt like a showpiece, now contained traces of actual life. Emma's toys were scattered across the expensive rug, but somehow they looked like they belonged there. The coffee table held 2 cups, one containing what looked like herbal tea, the other with the remains of Emma's lunch. He found Rosa and Emma on the terrace, which Marcus rarely used despite its stunning view of Central Park. Rosa had set up what appeared to be an outdoor playpen using furniture cushions and blankets, creating a safe space where Emma could explore while feeling the breeze and watching the movement of clouds. "How did it go?" Rosa asked without looking up from where she was showing Emma how to feel different textures, smooth stones, rough bark, soft fabric. Better than I expected. Much better. Marcus sat down beside them, watching Emma's fascination with a pinecone Rosa had given her. How was everything here? Perfect. We had breakfast together, then Emma showed me how well she can roll over. We read 3 books, though she particularly enjoyed trying to eat the pages. We took a walk through the building so she could see different environments, and we spent an hour on the terrace because she loves watching the trees move. Marcus realized that in all the months he had been caring for Emma, he had never taken her outside except for doctor's appointments. The idea of exposing her to the city, with all its noise and chaos, had seemed too risky. But watching her now, alert and engaged with the natural world around her, he understood that he had been limiting her experiences out of his own fears. The walk through the building, wasn't that disruptive? What if she had cried and bothered people? Rosa smiled. She didn't cry. She was curious. And the people we met were delighted to see her. Mrs. Patterson from the 8th floor invited us to tea tomorrow. The maintenance supervisor, Carlos, asked if we needed anything. People like babies, Marcus. They remind us of hope. That evening, as they settled into what was becoming their routine, Marcus noticed other changes Rosa had made. The harsh overhead lighting had been replaced with warm table lamps that created intimate spaces throughout the apartment. The kitchen smelled constantly of herbs and cooking food rather than the sterile cleanliness he had maintained since Sarah's death. Most significantly, Sarah's photographs were no longer isolated shrines, but integrated into the daily life of the home. You moved Sarah's pictures, Marcus observed, though not with accusation in his voice. I put them where Emma can see them, Rosa replied. A child should know her mother's face, should understand that she was loved before she was born. Marcus looked at the photograph of Sarah now sitting on Emma's dresser, angled so the baby could see it from her crib. For months, he had been afraid to let Emma see too many pictures of Sarah, worried that it might confuse or upset her. But Rosa had done something different. She had made Sarah's presence a natural part of Emma's world. Do you think she understands who that is? Marcus asked. I think she understands love. Whether she knows that specific love came from her mother or not isn't as important as knowing that she comes from love and continues to be loved. The real test of Marcus's trust in Rosa came a week later when Emma developed a fever. Marcus woke at 5 in the morning to the sound of Emma crying, but it wasn't her usual complaints about hunger or a wet diaper. This was the distressed cry of a sick child. He found Rosa already in the nursery, holding Emma and speaking to her in soothing Apache words. Emma's forehead was hot to the touch, her cheeks flushed with fever. We need to get her to the hospital, Marcus said immediately, reaching for his phone to call an ambulance. Marcus, wait, Rosa said calmly. Feel her forehead again. She's warm, but this isn't dangerous fever. This is her body fighting off something minor. How can you know that? What if it's serious? What if it gets worse? Rosa handed Emma to him, and Marcus could feel the heat radiating from his daughter's small body. His own temperature spiked with panic as he imagined all the terrible things that could be wrong. Babies get fevers, Rosa said matter-of-factly. It's how their immune systems learn to work. If we rush her to the hospital every time she's slightly sick, we teach her body that it can't heal itself. But what if you're wrong? What if this is the beginning of something serious? Rosa looked at him steadily. Then we will deal with it. But right now, this moment, she needs comfort and care, not panic and emergency rooms. Marcus found himself at a crossroads. Every instinct screamed at him to take Emma to the hospital immediately, to surround her with medical professionals and monitoring equipment. But Rosa's calm confidence and Emma's relatively peaceful demeanor in her arms suggested that perhaps this wasn't the crisis his fear was making it seem. "What would you do if this were your own grandchild?" he asked. "Exactly what I'm going to do for Emma. Cool baths to bring down the fever. Plenty of fluids. Skin-to-skin contact for comfort. Monitoring her breathing and responsiveness. And lots of love and patience while her body does what bodies are designed to do, heal." Marcus spent the day watching Rosa care for a sick Emma with the expertise of someone who had clearly dealt with childhood illnesses many times before. She gave the baby cool baths that made Emma fussy at first, but clearly provided relief. She offered frequent small amounts of formula and water, keeping Emma hydrated without overwhelming her sensitive stomach. Most importantly, she remained calm and nurturing, treating the fever as an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. "How do you know so much about this?" Marcus asked as Rosa prepared another cool compress. "I raised 6 children and helped with 23 grandchildren. Fever is as common as sunshine. You learn to tell the difference between normal sick and emergency sick." By evening, Emma's fever had broken, and she was sleeping peacefully in Rosa's arms. Marcus realized he had learned something crucial about parenting that day, that sometimes the most loving thing a parent could do was remain calm and trust the process rather than panic at the first sign of difficulty. "Thank you," he said to Rosa as she gently placed Emma in her crib. "I would have traumatized her with an unnecessary trip to the emergency room. You would have done what felt safest to you, and there's nothing wrong with that. But now you know that Emma is stronger than you thought, and that getting sick and getting better is part of growing up." That night, as Marcus lay in bed listening to Emma's peaceful breathing through the monitor, he reflected on how much his life had changed since Rosa's arrival. It wasn't just that Emma was happier and healthier, though she clearly was. It was that he was learning to be a different kind of father than he had thought possible. With the previous nannies, he had remained the anxious employer, managing caregivers while staying emotionally distant from the actual work of parenting. But Rosa was teaching him, through her example and her gentle guidance, how to trust both Emma's resilience and his own instincts as a father. More than that, Rosa was helping him understand that raising Emma didn't have to be the solitary, terrifying responsibility he had imagined. It could be a shared joy, a collaborative effort that brought out the best in everyone involved. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus found himself looking forward to the next day, not with the dread that had characterized his mornings for months, but with genuine curiosity about what Emma would discover next, and what Rosa would teach them both about the art of living as a family. 3 months after Rosa's arrival, Marcus realized that his apartment had become something he had never expected it could be, a home. The transformation had been so gradual that he almost missed it, like watching a plant grow day by day, until suddenly realizing it had become a tree. It started with small changes that Rosa made without asking permission. The formal dining room that had been used only for business entertaining became a play area where Emma could safely explore. The sterile kitchen became the heart of the home, filled with the constant aromas of Rosa's cooking and the sounds of Emma's delighted babbling as she watched Rosa prepare meals from her high chair. But the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The man who had once scheduled his life in 15-minute increments now found himself taking spontaneous breaks to play peekaboo with his daughter. The executive who had eaten most of his meals standing over the kitchen sink while reading financial reports now sat down for proper family dinners, even if one member of the family was still eating pureed vegetables and making more mess than progress. "You're different," his assistant Mrs. Rodriguez observed one afternoon when he called to check in from home. happier, more relaxed. Marcus looked across the living room where Rosa was reading to Emma, both of them absorbed in a story about rabbits and adventures. Emma was almost 7 months old now, sitting up independently and grabbing at everything within reach. Her personality was emerging in ways that delighted and surprised him daily. She was curious about everything, fearless in her explorations, and had developed a laugh so infectious that even the most stressful business calls seemed manageable when he heard it in the background. "I have good help," he told Mrs. Rodriguez, though the word help felt inadequate to describe what Rosa had brought to their lives. The truth was that Rosa had become far more than an employee. She had become Emma's grandmother in every way that mattered, and something like a wise aunt to Marcus himself. She offered guidance without judgment, support without conditions, and love without expectations of anything in return. This became most evident during Emma's first real illness. Not the minor fever from weeks before, but a proper stomach bug that left her miserable and clingy for 3 days. Marcus had wanted to take time off work to help care for her, but Rosa had gently insisted that maintaining normalcy would be better for everyone. "She doesn't need 2 anxious adults hovering over her," Rosa had said. "She needs 1 calm caregiver and 1 parent who comes home at the end of the day ready to love her, not exhausted from worrying all day." When Marcus had returned that evening to find Emma finally sleeping peacefully after hours of distress, he had found Rosa calmly cleaning up the day's messes and preparing a simple dinner as if caring for a sick baby was the most natural thing in the world. "How do you do it?" he had asked. "How do you stay so calm when she's suffering?" "Because panic doesn't heal anyone," Rosa had replied. "Children need to know that the adults caring for them are stronger than whatever is wrong. When you stay calm, you teach them that problems can be solved and that they are safe even when they don't feel well." It was during that illness that Marcus first called Rosa grandmother instead of by her first name, and she had smiled as if he had given her a precious gift. "In my culture," she had told him, "grandmother is not just a title for blood relations. It's a responsibility that some women are called to carry for children who need that kind of love." As spring turned to summer, Marcus began to understand that Rosa was teaching him about more than just childcare. She was showing him a completely different way of living, one that prioritized relationships and presence over achievement and accumulation. "You work too much," she told him one evening as he tried to review financial reports while playing with Emma on the floor. "I have responsibilities," Marcus replied, though he found it difficult to concentrate on spreadsheets when Emma was trying to crawl toward him, her face lit up with determination and joy. "Yes, you do. Your most important responsibility is sitting right in front of you, trying to show you how happy she is to see her father." Marcus looked down at Emma, who had managed to crawl close enough to grab his tie, and was now trying to put it in her mouth. Her eyes sparkled with mischief and delight, and he realized that she was indeed trying to engage with him while he was distracted by work that could easily wait until after she was asleep. He closed the laptop and scooped Emma up, spinning her gently in the air until she shrieked with laughter. "You're right," he told Rosa. "The reports can wait." "The reports will always be there," Rosa agreed. "But she will only be this age once." That became a turning point for Marcus. He began setting strict boundaries around work time and family time, something that would have been impossible before Rosa's calming influence made him realize that his anxiety about business was often just anxiety in general, transferred onto whatever seemed most urgent at the moment. He also began to appreciate Rosa's approach to integrating Emma into the world around them rather than treating her as a fragile creature who needed to be protected from all stimulation. Rosa regularly took Emma to different floors of the building, where she had somehow befriended nearly every resident. Mrs. Patterson on the 8th floor had become Emma's honorary great-aunt, while Carlos, the maintenance supervisor, had taken to bringing Emma small toys he found during his work. She needs to know that she belongs to a community, Rosa explained when Marcus expressed amazement at how many people in the building knew Emma's name. Babies who are raised in isolation become children who struggle to connect with others. The building's community embrace of Emma became especially meaningful during the summer blackout that left Manhattan without power for 6 hours. Marcus had been trapped in his office building downtown, unable to get home due to subway closures, frantically worried about Emma and Rosa being alone in the dark apartment. When he finally made it home, he found Rosa and Emma in Mrs. Patterson's apartment along with 5 other residents, sharing a candlelit dinner prepared on a gas camping stove that Carlos had produced from his emergency supplies. Emma was being passed from person to person like a beloved family member, gurgling happily in a warm glow of candles and community attention. "You see," Rosa said as Marcus joined the impromptu gathering, "she doesn't just have a father and a grandmother. She has a whole village that cares about her." Marcus realized that night that he had been thinking about parenthood all wrong. He had been trying to be everything Emma needed by himself, when what she actually needed was to be part of a larger network of caring adults who each contributed something different to her development. As summer progressed, Marcus began to see other changes in his relationship with Emma. The baby who had once cried inconsolably in his arms now reached for him when he came home from work, babbling excitedly as if she had been saving up stories to tell him. She had learned to play games with him, clapping her hands when he made funny faces and trying to imitate the sounds he made. "She knows you're her daddy now," Rosa observed one evening as Marcus fed Emma her dinner while making exaggerated airplane noises that sent her into fits of giggles. "She always knew that," Marcus replied, though he understood what Rosa meant. There was a difference between biological fact and emotional reality, and Emma now responded to him with the eager affection of a child who trusted and loved her parent. The biggest test of their family bond came in August when Rosa announced that she needed to return to Arizona for 2 weeks to attend to family business. "My sister is having surgery," she explained. "I need to be there to help with her children while she recovers." Marcus felt his old panic rising immediately. "What about Emma? What about us?" Rosa looked at him seriously. "Marcus, you are Emma's father. You have been learning to care for her for months now. You don't need me to survive 2 weeks together. But what if something goes wrong? What if she gets sick again? What if I can't handle her routine? Then you will figure it out, the same way parents have been figuring things out forever. You will make mistakes, and Emma will be fine. You will learn things about yourselves that you never knew, and you will both be stronger for it." Despite Rosa's confidence in him, Marcus spent the week before her departure in a state of barely controlled anxiety, making lists of emergency contacts, stockpiling supplies, and trying to memorize every detail of Emma's care. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be," Rosa told him the night before she left. "Emma doesn't need perfect care. She needs love and attention and someone who responds to her needs. You already know how to do all of those things." The first morning alone with Emma, Marcus woke to find her standing up in her crib for the first time, holding onto the rails and bouncing excitedly as if she had accomplished something remarkable. "Look at you," he said, scooping her up and spinning her around. "When did you learn to do that?" Emma laughed and clapped her hands, and Marcus realized that this was exactly the kind of moment Rosa had been talking about a discovery that belonged to just the two of them, a milestone that they would share without needing anyone else to mediate the experience. The 2 weeks passed more smoothly than Marcus had dared hope. He and Emma developed their own routines and rhythms, different from the ones they shared with Rosa, but equally satisfying. He learned to trust his instincts about what Emma needed, to read her cues without constantly second-guessing himself. Most importantly, he learned that he could be a good father not despite his lack of experience, but because of his willingness to learn and adapt. Emma didn't need him to be perfect. She just needed him to be present, attentive, and loving. When Rosa returned, she found Marcus and Emma thriving together in ways that surprised even her. Emma had learned 2 new words, dada and up, and Marcus had learned to cook 3 simple meals and had successfully navigated Emma's first restaurant experience. "You both look different," Rosa observed as she watched Marcus and Emma play together on the floor. "More confident, more connected." "We are," Marcus agreed. "We figured out how to be a team." That night, as they settled back into their 3-person routine, Marcus reflected on how much his definition of family had expanded since Rosa's arrival. What had started as a desperate employment arrangement had become something much deeper, a chosen family bound together by love and mutual care rather than just blood or obligation. Emma was no longer just his daughter. She was their daughter, loved and nurtured by multiple adults who each brought different strengths to her upbringing. And he was no longer a struggling single father. He was part of a family system that supported and strengthened each of its members. Looking at Rosa, who was humming an Apache lullaby while Emma drifted off to sleep in her arms, Marcus felt a gratitude so profound it nearly brought him to tears. This woman had saved more than just his daughter's well-being. She had saved his entire understanding of what it meant to be a family. 1 year after Rosa Whitehorse had mysteriously appeared at his door, Marcus Chin stood in the same nursery where he had once felt so helpless and overwhelmed, watching his daughter take her first independent steps. Emma, now 15 months old, toddled unsteadily from Rosa's outstretched arms toward Marcus, her face glowing with pride and determination. "Come on, little star," Rosa encouraged softly. "Show your daddy how strong you are." Emma took 3 wobbly steps before tumbling into Marcus's arms, erupting in delighted laughter as he caught her and spun her around. The moment felt symbolic of everything that had changed in their lives. Emma's growing independence, Marcus's growing confidence as a father, and Rosa's steady presence supporting them both through every milestone. "She's ready for the world," Rosa said, watching Emma immediately try to walk again, undaunted by her tumble. The apartment around them bore little resemblance to the sterile showplace it had been before Rosa's arrival. Emma's artwork, enthusiastic scribbles, and finger paintings decorated the refrigerator. Toys were scattered across the living room in the cheerful chaos of a home where a child actually lived and played. The formal dining room had been converted into a combination playroom and library filled with books in both English and Apache that Rosa read to Emma every day. But the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The anxious, desperate man who had counted the days between Nanny departures had become a confident father who looked forward to spending time with his daughter. He had learned to read Emma's moods and needs, to comfort her when she was distressed, to play with her in ways that made both of them laugh until their sides hurt. "I have something to tell you both," Rosa said that evening as they sat around the dinner table, a ritual that had become sacred in their household. Emma was in her high chair, methodically dropping pieces of chicken onto the floor for the pure joy of watching them fall, while Marcus and Rosa shared the meal, she had prepared. Something in Rose's tone made Marcus look up sharply. Over the months, he had learned to read Rose's expressions as carefully as Emma's, and he could sense that this was an important conversation. "My grandson Tommy is getting married in November," Rosa continued. "The ceremony will be in Arizona, on our tribal land. It's a traditional Apache wedding that will last for 4 days." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You're leaving? I'm asking if you and Emma would like to come with me, to meet my family and see where I come from." The relief that flooded through Marcus was followed immediately by a dozen practical concerns. Emma's so young for that kind of travel. What about her schedule, her pediatrician appointments, my work obligations? Rosa smiled the patient smile she had perfected over their year together. Emma is old enough to travel, healthy enough for adventure, and curious enough to benefit from seeing a different world. As for your work obligations, when was the last time you took a real vacation? Marcus realized he couldn't remember. Even before Sarah's death, he had been so focused on building his business that he had never taken time off that wasn't directly related to advancing his career. "I've never been to a Native American wedding," he said, though his tone suggested interest rather than reluctance. "Then, it's time you learned about the other half of Emma's family," Rosa replied. Over the following weeks, as Rosa made arrangements for their trip, Marcus began to understand that this journey was about more than attending a wedding. Rosa was inviting them into her world, offering to share with Emma the cultural heritage that Rosa had been quietly teaching her through songs and stories and gentle lessons about their connection to nature and community. "Emma needs to know where her Apache grandmother comes from," Rosa explained as she showed Marcus pictures of her family and the reservation where she had grown up. "She needs to understand that she belongs to more than just this city and this apartment." The trip to Arizona became a revelation for Marcus. He had expected to feel out of place, to be obviously the outsider at a celebration of traditions he knew nothing about. Instead, he found himself welcomed into Rose's extended family with a warmth that reminded him of the way the residents of his building had embraced Emma. Rose's family was enormous. Dozens of cousins, aunts, uncles, and adopted relatives who treated each other with the kind of easy affection Marcus had only observed from a distance. Emma was immediately claimed by a group of Rose's great-nieces, girls ranging in age from 8 to 16 who fought over who would get to carry her, feed her, and show her the wonders of reservation life. "She fits right in," Rosa observed as they watched Emma being passed from relative to relative, each one delighting in her responses to new faces and new experiences. "They all look at her like she belongs here," Marcus said, surprised by how natural Emma seemed in this environment that was completely foreign to him. "Because she does belong here. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to love and care for each other. My family chose Emma the moment I chose her." The wedding ceremony itself was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. It took place outdoors under a vast Arizona sky, with traditions that connected the couple not just to each other, but to their ancestors, their community, and the land itself. Emma sat quietly in Marcus's lap for most of the ceremony, seeming to sense the importance and solemnity of the occasion. In Apache tradition, Rose's brother explained to Marcus during one of the ceremony breaks, marriage creates new relationships for the entire extended family. Tommy's wife doesn't just become his partner. She becomes daughter to his parents, sister to his siblings, aunt to his nieces and nephews. Marcus thought about how Rosa had become grandmother to Emma and something like family to him through the same kind of chosen kinship. The Apache understanding of family as an expanding network of mutual care and responsibility resonated deeply with his own experience of how their household had become a family. On their last night in Arizona, Rosa took Marcus and Emma to a hilltop where they could see for miles across the desert landscape. Emma toddled around exploring rocks and plants while Rosa and Marcus sat watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible in nature. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for everything, for saving Emma, for saving me, for showing us both what family really means." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma discover a small flower growing between two rocks. "You don't need to thank me," she said finally. "You gave me the chance to be grandmother to a child who needed one. That's a gift, not a service. Will you stay with us? Forever, I mean. Will you be Emma's grandmother as she grows up?" Rosa turned to look at him seriously. "Do you want me to stay? I can't imagine our family without you." Marcus replied honestly. "Emma loves you. I love you. You're not our employee anymore. You're our family. Then I'll stay as long as you need me, and probably longer than that. Emma will need her Apache grandmother when she starts asking questions about who she is and where she comes from." Flying back to New York, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that desperate night when Rosa had appeared at his door. Emma slept peacefully in his arms, exhausted from days of new experiences and overwhelming attention from her extended family. She was no longer the cranky, difficult baby who had cried constantly in those early months. She had become a confident, curious toddler who approached the world with the security of knowing she was loved unconditionally. But the changes went deeper than Emma's development. Marcus himself had been transformed from an anxious single father into a man who understood that parenting wasn't a problem to be solved, but a relationship to be nurtured. He had learned to trust his instincts, to find joy in small moments, and to build a life that prioritized love and connection over achievement and accumulation. Most importantly, he had learned that family wasn't something you were born into, but something you created through daily choices to care for each other. Rosa had taught him that love multiplied rather than divided when it was shared, that Emma could have a grandmother who wasn't related to her by blood, and love her no less fiercely than any biological relative. Back in their apartment, as they settled into their familiar routines, Marcus noticed that the space felt different again. It wasn't just that they had returned with new photographs and gift from Arizona. It was that their home now felt connected to something larger, to Rosa's family, to Apache traditions, to an understanding of heritage and belonging that extended far beyond the walls of their Manhattan apartment. "We're home," Emma said clearly as Rosa carried her into the nursery. One of the new words she had learned during their trip, though Marcus suspected she understood the concept better than the pronunciation. "Yes, we are," Rosa agreed, settling Emma into her crib. "We're home with our family." That night, as Marcus listened to Rosa singing Emma to sleep with an Apache lullaby she had learned from her own grandmother, he felt a completeness he hadn't known was possible. His daughter would grow up knowing she came from love. Love from her mother who had died bringing her into the world, love from her father who had learned to be brave enough to parent her, and love from her chosen grandmother who had appeared like an answer to a prayer when they needed her most. Emma would grow up understanding that family could be created as well as inherited, that love was stronger than biology, and that sometimes the most important people in your life arrived unexpectedly and transformed everything by simply choosing to stay. 6 months later, Marcus would receive the papers making Rosa Emma's legal guardian in the event of his death, and Rosa would receive the papers making her his beneficiary for a trust fund that would ensure she could care for Emma in comfort for the rest of her life. But those papers would only formalize what had been true from the moment Rosa had walked into their lives, that they were a family bound together by choice and sustained by love. And In the years that followed, as Emma grew from toddler to child to teenager, she would never doubt that she was exactly where she belonged. She would grow up bilingual in English and Apache, bicultural in Manhattan sophistication and tribal wisdom, and completely secure in the knowledge that she was loved by multiple parents who had chosen each other as surely as they had chosen her. The story that had begun with a desperate father's search for help had become something much more beautiful. The story of how three people from completely different worlds had created a family that honored all of their backgrounds while building something entirely new together. It was proof that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simple willingness to open your door to a stranger who turns out to be exactly the family you never knew you needed.